Big old coon too.
Obama.
Thanks, miss. Boy, if that don't make you smile, I don't know what it will, man. I don't. You need to check your post, bro. You did.
Welcome to Thoughts of a Dog Man podcast. On this episode, we discuss some things to think about for your next puppy selection. So sit back, relax, and let's talk about some dogs.
Welcome back, everybody. Hope you're having a happy Monday. It's still going for you. Hope you continue to have a good day. I'm your host, Stevie Thompson, Balling Out Kennels. And you know, over here, we're going to talk about some dogs. We are going to talk about some dogs. And with the spring weather that's coming, that's starting to show, here up in Northeast Iowa, our trees are still bare. We don't have any leaves on our trees yet. I know some of my buddies down south, they already got a lot of greenery going on. We do not have that. But it's starting to turn. You see some of the trees starting to get green. So you're looking forward to the spring coming. But that also got me thinking, I like sharing my thoughts with y'all about puppies. We want to talk about puppies today. And the reason I want to talk about puppies is it's springtime. Usually this time of year, you really start to see an influx of puppies. A lot of litters are starting to be made from the winter, are going to be produced, come late summer, or just getting into that spring fever of having puppies. So I really start thinking, okay, we're going to talk about bloodlines and brains. That's what I'm going to call this show today, Bloodline and Brains. What makes a great hunting dog or a hunting puppy or a hunting prospect? What makes that? So I really was sitting there thinking, I'm like, okay, how can I really get this concept across? And anybody who don't know me, y'all going to figure out right now, I love chocolate chip cookies. Besides my dogs and turkey hunting, and probably fishing too. I like catching flatheads. But besides those things, the way to my heart is some chocolate chip cookies. Man, you cannot beat some fresh, homemade, baked chocolate chip cookies. To me, you can't get around it. You cannot get around it. But that brought me to start thinking like, okay, what makes a great chocolate chip cookie? It really comes down to all the ingredients that go into it, right? Now, there's different recipes out there that can produce a certain type of cookie. You can add, peanut butter to it. You can add, some other ingredients to it. But there's a lot of base ingredients that come with making chocolate chip cookies. So even with that, if you were to leave out some of those key ingredients, like your eggs, your flour, you got a little bit of salt in there. Some people like putting vanilla in it. Some of those key ingredients, if you were to leave those out, would they still be chocolate chip cookies? And what would they taste like? Can you really predict what it would taste like if you were to remove some of those ingredients? Or what happens if you add too much of one of those ingredients? If you add a little bit too much vanilla. I know some people like to put, pudding mix in their cookies too. What if you add some extra or too much of an ingredient? What would that cookie taste like? I really start piecing that together with these dogs and with these puppies. The recipe is basically the bloodline that your dog is out of. That's basically its recipe, its genetics. It's the baseline of what creates that dog that you are looking at getting, or you're looking at getting a dog out of. That's what it comes from. Their blood, the ancestries of that dog is basically the recipe to create that dog that you have or that puppy that you have. Now, I also like, besides chocolate chip cookies, it's coming that time of year, barbecue. Man, I love some good barbecue. I love to grill. I love to smoke meat. We talking about some pulled pork, briskets, smoking some of those, fried, grilled chicken, all those sort of things. And like the way I grew up, there's two different kinds of cooking. You can cook by feel, or you can follow the recipe. Now, we're just going to take an example. Let's just say, again, I love me some barbecue chicken. So we're going to take the concept of chicken. Now, there are some really famous, people who barbecue and competitions and that sort of stuff. They have it lined out to the exact measurements of what ingredients they like to use, from seasoned salt, lemon pepper, regular pepper, cayenne pepper, just so many different ingredients, and they have it measured out, and that's their exact recipe. And you, just like me, can take that exact recipe and get the same ingredients that person used and be able to produce basically the same tasting, or very similar to the same tasting product that they would make. Or there's cooking by feel. Feel is basically you're seasoning the meat, you looking at it, you're eyeballing it, you're kind of figuring out, okay, this is a decent amount of this. Don't really want to put too much salt into it. Don't want to put too much pepper into it. But each time you go and cook or season some food, it may not always be the exact same amount of whatever ingredient you're using. That doesn't mean it's not going to taste bad, but sometimes it may taste bad. And what did you just learn? Okay, I might have put too much lemon pepper this time, or I might have put too much, pepper that time. You're starting to learn, but it's still a feeling process. It's nothing that's set in stone on how I'm going to create or produce the exact thing every single time. What am I getting at? Is really no predictability. Using a recipe or using a good bloodline allows you to have predictability when you're getting a puppy or working with a dog. That's all it really does. It allows you to know what type of traits, what type of attitude this dog can have, the abilities they can have. It gives you some of the idea and comfort to believing in, okay, I have this dog that's from a proven bloodline. I know its genetics. I know where it's come from. There's been previous litters before, and they all had about the same amount of abilities. That just allows you to know that the dog I'm getting, or possibly getting, has the possibility to be X, Y, and Z. So it's really no different now with all these puppies. When you're going to pick a puppy, especially somebody being new, it's something you really want to start to pay attention to, is where the dogs come from. Yes, there may be a cross that's being made between these two, specific dogs, and do your homework and do your research and talking to the person who's producing this litter and asking them certain questions. Hey, has this litter been produced before? Do you have any contact information from some guys or women or whoever who has some of the dogs out of this last litter? Going into what the parents are like. What are the dad, what's the dad like? What traits and abilities does the dad possess? What traits and abilities does the mom possess? And really getting, comfort, really starting to understand what those dogs can produce. What are they? But I think one thing that new people are looking into getting puppies forget about, and I think it's even more important than what the actual parents are, is looking at what the grandparents are. The grandparents, I think, play so much more of a role in predicting what potentially you could get out of this puppy. I'm no different than you, and for a long time, I thought the same from the standpoint of, okay, let's take an example of barking. If I have a dog that is open on track, he gives a lot of mouth. And for people who don't know, most dogs are open trailers. So when they smell the scent of the game that's left on the ground, they're going to bark to let the handler know, or just natural, that they smell whatever game they're on. So as they're tracking the scent and following the scent of that game, they're going to open on the ground. They're going to be barking. They're going to have some type of indicator to let you as a handler know that, hey, I'm on the scent. I'm working this track. I'm following where it goes. This is where I am, as they're barking and moving. Then on a flip, you can have a dog who is silent on track. A lot more cur dogs are this way. Y'all know I love my leopard cur dogs. My dog Bama is a leopard cur. He is completely silent on track, to where you do not hear him until he locates in trees, and he's a treeing dog. You won't hear Bama until he does that. Only other time you will hear Bama is if he is right behind that coon. If he is right chasing on the heels of that coon, he will open up a little bit. But those are two things. So I would think, let's say for this example, I have a dog that's, really open mouth on track, or just open mouth in general. They're loose with their mouth. They bark quite a bit. If I could take a dog that doesn't bark as much, or pretty much silent, if I cross those two dogs, then I'm going to get, man, boom, I got it. I got it figured out. I'm going to have a dog, or most of the dogs are going to come out medium. They're going to come out perfect. I don't quite think it works that way. And I start to think, some of the crosses I've made, trying to really pay attention to if it's that exact thing. But what I started to notice is when I would look back at what the grandparents were, mom or grandma, grandpa of the dogs, those are the traits that really start to come out of that litter. It's almost like it skipped a generation, or sometimes it may skip 2 generations. So I think sometimes, especially being new, you really want to get some information on what are the grandparents like. Get some traits and abilities of those dogs, and it'll give you a little bit better idea on what you could be getting. Because you could couple some of those traits and abilities with the actual parents of the new puppy to get an idea of what the puppy could be. Also getting, your feet wet and getting a new puppy and starting to look and talk to people. One thing we forget to ask, okay, what are the bad traits of these dogs? We all love talking about the good traits. I'm no different when it comes to that. You love talking about how good the dog is. We can't forget, not all dogs are not perfect. These dogs are not perfect. Just about every single one of them has some type of fault. And you being the new person looking to get a dog out of these, or out of the grandparents, it would really be important for you to figure out, okay, what kind of bad traits do these dogs have? Because again, it will give you an idea of what you could be running into. If we really started to breed more so for what the bad traits are, or being conscious of what those bad traits are, will help us from making bad crosses. Because obviously that bad trait is probably, and I've seen it, to where those bad traits sometimes are stronger than the good ones. And those traits are the ones that are going to come out before the good traits come out. Again, it doesn't mean you have to shy away from that cross or that breeder or any of that sort of stuff, but you want to have as much information as you can before you make your selection. And that's one thing I think you should really talk about. And then that goes into figuring out what the traits and abilities that you like for yourself. Is a dog who gives more mouth on track, is that okay with you? Are you going to be competition hunting them? Are you just going to be, fun hunt? Are you just going to be pleasure hunting? If some of those things don't matter when you're pleasure hunting, then perfectly fine. At least you know what you could potentially get into. So doing some of the research and figuring out what the grandparents are, because really the genetics, all they really are is the blueprint. They are the blueprint. They're giving you an idea. When you go to build a building, I know we have a lot of construction people, and my hat's off to y'all for being able to do that and know those things, because we need you in the world. When somebody goes to build something, they have a blueprint, or they have instructions on putting a building together. Those blueprints is basically the walkthrough on how to set this up so it is structurally sound and everything is where it needs to be. It's no different with genetics of a dog. That is your blueprint to figure out what this dog could potentially be. But the instincts of a dog, I think the instincts, and we want to, you'll hear a lot talking about natural. I want a dog that's natural. I want a dog that's natural, which is excellent. Basically what they're saying is they want a dog that can have abilities to do, trailing or treeing, if we're talking about tree dogs, or running the scent, using its nose. They want that dog to do that without them having to teach that dog to do it. But where does that come back? It comes right back to genetics. The instinct is basically genetics on display. That's really all it is. Once you take the genetics of the parents, the grandparents, and every line of dogs that come before that actual puppy, when he displays that natural instinct to do a certain thing, it's really the blueprint on display. That's what you're breeding for. But what issue you may run into is when you have a blueprint or you have genetics that are all over the board. What do I mean by that? All over the board is basically saying that you have a dog that has, X, Y, and Z traits, and you have a dog that has completely opposite traits of this dog. The different bloodline is completely different. And we'll go into, we'll do an episode at some point on, blind breeding. That is another really good predictor of what a dog could be. So if you have dogs that are fairly line bred, that they have similar ancestries throughout its pedigree, and then you take a dog that has a completely different ancestry and you throw it in the mix, you are pretty much scrambling the board. You really don't have any idea what could come out of that. It's really hard to predict. And I'm not saying that sometimes that actually works, and it's called an outcross. Sometimes that actually works to where you have a line of dogs who are similar ancestries, grandparents, great grandparents, uncles, aunts, all that sort of thing on that side. And you take a dog from a completely different ancestry and you mix them together. You can produce some really good dogs out of that. But again, it's still almost a crapshoot. You really won't have an idea on what you're getting when you do that. You're scrambling the board. So selecting some of those traits and some, for breeders, let's talk about beagles. All beagles for the most part will run a track. That's just their naturally going to want to use their nose. It's almost an instinctual thing to use their nose. But certain dogs have better traits or better genetics to help them use their nose better. And that comes with the brains part of it. They have to have brains to use their abilities. It's no different than an athlete have all the skills, to be a great football player. They can run fast, they can catch, they got great footwork, all these sort of things, but they can't remember to play. They can't remember to use their abilities. What good is that? It's really no good. It's really no good. Treeing dogs is the same. Again, we talk about naturals. Basically, in a tree dog, something natural would be their barking instinct. You don't have to go out to a dog and tell them to bark. It's just a natural thing that they do. That's natural. Genetic side of it will be that dog now uses its bark to indicate something. Now it's using that bark to trail game. Now it's using that bark to show you which tree, the squirrel is up or the coon is up. It's no different in bird dogs. We talk about instincts versus genetics. Again, instinct was you could have, and I'm just learning this on the bird dog, the bird dog side of it, to where, I have a Llewellyn, I have an English, and I'm just training them and they're teaching me so much. But them, we could just be walking out in the yard and they'll lock up, freeze, and point. It was not something that I taught them to do. That was just a natural instinct, but it come from the ancestry, the genetics that were before them, to bring that out, to help you predict that this dog has natural abilities to do whatever you teach him to do. So again, it really goes into saying that when you're picking those first dogs, whether it's a beagle, a tree dog, or bird dog, doing your research and having conversations with the breeders and trying to talk to as many people as you can who have had these dogs before you to get an idea of what you can kind of predict. And yeah, sometimes making, the selection that you pick may not be necessarily what you thought it was. And that's okay. But at least you have an understanding of it's all potential. It's all potential. There's no guarantees in any of this. We have no guarantees when we make a cross. And that's something I always like to point out to people is, hey, this is a cross. These are the parents. These are grandparents. These are the traits and abilities that they had. This is what, I kind of didn't like out of this dog. And we're going to make this cross. And here's the reason why we're making this cross. Because I like this out of that dog, or this grandparent or that grandparent did X, Y, and Z. They've had a track record of reproducing good dogs. That's where I'm making my selection, is because I'm hoping to pull the traits out of the ancestors into this dog. And then down the line, it's no different from the parents themselves. A generation or two down the line, if this dog were to get bred, I will pull out some of those traits and abilities and put them into there. So then it's all building blocks. That's really all it is. And even with the dogs, you can start talking about, the nature versus nurture. How much does a dog ability is inherited versus trained? That's just another way of talking about, something that's natural and something that's trained. A way I like to do it with my beagles to see if they have the natural ability to want to use their nose is I'll have some puppies and I'll have them out. Obviously they're over 8 weeks old. Sometimes I like to wait until they're like 3 months old, maybe even a little bit younger. And I use the dog food that they eat every single day. They know what that food is. They know when it's time to eat. You see those pups, they get down. They eat a lot of food. They love it. So as they're out and about just being puppies, I really like to
Bluetooth connected.
I really just like to take, the dog's food and I'll just kind of throw it out on the ground in an area. Just throw it out on the ground in an area and I will walk the dogs over there. If you pay really close attention, what you'll see is that dog or whichever one's going to use its nose, or maybe even it's 3 or 4 at that time, as they're walking over to that area, you will just see them just boom. They just lock onto it. They don't quite know what they're smelling. Obviously, they know it's food, but they don't know why their nose got activated so hard at that moment. And if you watch them, I like to watch and see who's able to pick up the kibble, the pieces of dog food on the ground, who's able to find it, pick it up and eat it, and watch how many pieces they can pick up and eat in a short period of time. That's something I keep my mind on to think, okay, that dog, he knows how to use his nose. He has a decent nose enough to pick up this small little piece of kibble that I literally just put on the ground 2 minutes ago that doesn't have a huge amount of scent yet piling up, but enough for that dog to pick up on it. That's a dog I would like to watch. That's a dog I'll keep my eye on and see how well they progress from there. That's a natural thing. Nurturing is you can teach a dog to do, just about anything. They're reward driven. Dogs are reward driven. So a lot of that natural ability of using their nose, there are some things you can teach them, laying drags. Now you're starting to nurture that ability of him to use his nose and trying to trick him, making it a game, making him have fun. The natural ability is there. Now you're going to nurture it and make him use his mind, use his brain with his nose coupled together to produce a better dog. Tree dogs are the same. Laying drags. I really like to use drag work. And there are some people who may think, doing too many drags once they get past a certain age can actually hinder a dog because they're no longer smelling you. They're no longer smelling the game that you're dragging, but they're starting to track you instead, which I completely understand and does make sense. But most of the time when a dog's that young, they're not to that point of tracking you. And if they are, that just lets you know that you're able to move past that step and start to do harder training techniques. Or start to do something a little bit hard for that dog because he's progressing. That dog is fairly smart to be doing that. And one way to kind of test that is as you lay the drag to a tree. Let's say we're going to talk about tree dogs. If you lay that drag to a tree, rub it up the tree, I'm not going to walk back the same direction I just came from. I'm going to literally walk a completely different way back before I go get the dog. What that will allow me to do, I'll put the dog in the area of the scent. If they work that scent to that tree and they keep going past the tree, oh, okay, he's smelling me. He's not smelling, the coon drag or the squirrel drag or whatever it is, or even a rabbit foot. I like to do that with my beagles. They're not following that scent. They're following me. Okay, now I know that dog is fairly smart. Okay, now I got to step up my game as a trainer to pull out some of those abilities of that dog. So that and that even goes into when you're picking puppies, just thinking about what are some signs of an early promising dog, an early promising puppy, using some of those tips and techniques. I like to see a puppy who is fairly bold. Not saying that some dogs aren't timid dogs can't produce or can't be great dogs in the end of the day. But if you're looking at it too, that's something that you can talk about with the breeder. Hey, were any of the parents timid when they were younger? What about grandparents? Can I talk to somebody who had the grandparents of this cross? Did they show any timidness when they were younger? That way you can have an idea, okay, this is a potential that I could have. I was always taught too by my mentor, Mike. It's like he really likes seeing the dog that's first to do something. Let's say you have them in a whelping box, and they're getting to the age where they can move around, they can stand, their eyes are open, they're starting to be more active, and you can really start to see a little bit of that personality coming out. Who's the first dog to try to get out of the box? Who's the first dog to try to get out into the world and see what the heck is out here? I want to figure out what's going on out here. What's the first dog to do that? The first 2 or 3 dogs to do that. Being the first, being not afraid to get away from the group a little bit and explore. I like seeing some of those. Again, checking the nose ability, as I was just talking about earlier, using the food trick. I like to take some kibble, put it on the ground, and see which dog can find it naturally. Simple obedience. Once they get to that age, simple obedience. Can they learn what I'm trying to teach them? Can they do the simple sit? Can they stay? Can they do some of those simple obedience techniques? Or does it take me a long time and having to keep teaching this dog and reteaching this dog and trying to figure out if they can learn it? That's another brain test. So those bloodlines and the brains play such a huge part. And again, you as somebody who's new to it, really paying attention and doing your research on those 2 things will allow you to, get started on the right foot. Really allow you to have a potential puppy that can, bring on so many more memories down the road, can start out in the right way, be easy to train. That's a part of being natural as well. Ability to easily be trained. Because there's so many things that you can skip past that you don't have to teach a natural dog. But again, those natural dogs do not come along by just random crosses. As breeders, and the person you're going to get a dog from, they should really be strategic in the crosses that they make to produce the best product out there. Produce the best product. Again, if you went to Chips Ahoy and bought some cookies, I love my cookies, I'll get back to it. But if you go to Chips Ahoy, you expect a certain product of their cookies that you're going to get. You go to Subway got some of the best cookies as well. I'm just saying. If you go to Subway, you have an expectation of what their cookies are going to be like. Now, if they just, randomly put some ingredients together and you go to buy and you take a bite out of it, you're like, what the heck is this? This is not what I thought it was going to be. Not even close. What's the likelihood of you going back to Subway to get some cookies or Chips Ahoy? How often are you going to buy those cookies, not understanding or not knowing what's going to come out of that? It's pretty low. So again, that was just some of the things I was thinking about this week, trying to get people on the right foot. This is the time of year where puppies are going to be front and center. It's an exciting time of year. Obviously, the weather's turning, picking and selecting puppies. I want you to have the best opportunity and get you selecting the best puppy you can. So come fall, you can be having a lot of fun with your friends and getting the dog trained up and having the abilities to do so. So again, I appreciate y'all looking or listening to it. Man, it's coming along, people. It's really coming along, and I'm excited for, the progression of this. Next week is going to be a pretty fun show, too. I think we're going to keep building off of the puppies. We'll probably start talking about young dogs and different traits of young dogs and different training techniques of young dogs, when to start them, how to start them. Just some of the things I like to do. And again, over here, we always keep it respectful. If y'all can drop some comments, just let me know more topics you want to hear about. If you agree or disagree, like I said, we always keep it respectful, and I'm trying to learn just as much as you guys out there. I learned so much from y'all, just the same way I hope that y'all learn from me. And that's all it's all about. We're just going to work together and try to perfect the craft of building amazing and producing future dogs that we can be proud of. So I'm Stevie Thomas of Balling Out Kennels. Stay sharp, stay real, stay hungry.